All praise be to Allah, our Creator, Cherisher, and Sustainer. We bear witness there is no deity worthy of worship save Allah. And we bear witness that Muhammad is his last messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We ask Allah to send His blessings, His peace on our beloved Prophet Muhammad, his household, his wives, and those who followed him and will continue to follow him till the day of judgment. My dear respected brothers and sisters, fear Allah and know that you're going to meet Him on the day of judgment without a barrier. When a person would look on his right side and see only the hellfire, then he would look on the left side and see the hellfire. So as your Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam warned you that shield yourself from the hellfire by doing any possible good deed, as little as giving a charity as much as half a day for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Dear respected brothers, do know that the most beneficial and truthful of words are the words of Allah. And the best of guidance is the guidance of His Prophet Muhammad. And any innovated matter is a misguidance, and all misguidance leads to the hellfire. Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu, once walking the path of the Medina, looking into the affairs of his people when he was a Khalifa, and heard a person making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A dua is worthy of understanding and looking into to benefit from. He was making dua, O Allah, Allahumma ja'alni min al-qaleel. O Allah, make me among those few. With the literal words. And he kept repeating that and repeating that. To a point that Umar radiallahu anhu was provoked and intrigued by that dua and wanted to know what he was talking about. So he knocked the door and asked them, I want to know what you mean by those who are few, the few people that you're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to select you and makes you amongst them. So that person asked, what I mean by the qaleel is what Allah said in the Quran. وَمَا آمَنَ مَعَهُ إِلَّا قَلِيلٌ. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked about Ibrahim, He said, and only few people believed along with him and were in his companionship. And also what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned in the Quran by saying, وَقَلِيلٌ مِّنْ عِبَادِيَ الشَّكُورِ. And only a few amongst my servants are thankful and grateful to the blessings and to the bounties that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has bestowed upon His people. So Umar went on and he said, كُلُّ النَّاسِ أَفْقَهُ مِنْكَ يَا عُمَرُ. All people know better than you do, Umar, and comprehend the deen better than you do. That's out of his humility and humbleness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But in these words lies a great lesson for us. When we're living in an era of a globalization, where we're influenced individually and collectively, as individuals, as family members, community members, even mosque members, we're influenced constantly by temptation, by media, by schools, by society, by other communities. And there is constant pressure of alteration and adjusting to the surroundings in a good or a negative way, positive way or a bad way. That's the effect of globalization. And this is the test that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has afflicted on us. What are we going to do? Are we going to be steadfast on the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? on the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, or are we going to go with the flow and just do what other people do and be subject to the peer pressures and alter our habits, our behaviors, even our thoughts and faith according to what the surrounding environment subjects us to? In this dua, that person, one of the tabi'een, he was asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make him among those who are few people who were steadfast, believed with Ibrahim when Ibrahim was the only person on earth along with his wife Sarah were the believers. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna Ibrahim kana ummah qanitan lillah. Ibrahim was the sole person who was a believer. And in the interpretation of this ayah, it is mentioned in the hadith that Ibrahim talked to his wife Sarah and said, you and I are the only two believers on earth. And yet, he was steadfast. And that circle of faith kept propagating till Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honored few people with him. And then obviously we're believers because of our forefather Ibrahim alayhi salam. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described him as ummah. And what ummah means as an imam, a leader, a role model, an example, but also a nation. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put the blessings He has bestowed in a nation on one individual person, and He's asking you to follow the footsteps of Ibrahim alayhi salam by being one of those few people, or by being an example that follows the role model of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered our beloved Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam by saying, فَاصْبِرْ كَمَا صَبَرَ أُولُو الْعَزْمِ مِنَ الرُّسُلِ. And be patient and steadfast as those people of power, vigor and vim before you has done. And those are Ibrahim, Nuh, Musa, and Isa alayhi salam wa ala nabiyyina afdalu salatu wassalam. And this is the example of a Muslim. In times of temptation, tribulation, when there is a turmoil, when all the environment around you is trying to pull you in different directions, you follow the footsteps of your Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam and follow the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, be steadfast as those before you has been. فَاصْبِرْ كَمَا صَبَرَ أُولُو الْعَزْمِ مِنَ الرُّسُلِ. This is what the Prophet ﷺ has also made in his dua. Allahumma alhimni al-azimata fi rushd. Oh Allah, give me the vigor, give me the commitment, the steadfastness on the guidance that you have bestowed on me. And this is the real example that we have to represent for our families, for our spouses, for our children, and for our communities as leaders, whether in the masjid or any circle that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that has entrusted us with. That we do not bow to temptation and we only follow what's right and we follow the footsteps of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. When that happens, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kills you, as He described Bani Israel. وَجَعَلْنَا مِنْهُمْ أئمة يهدون بأمرنا لما صبروا وكانوا بآياتنا يوقنون. And we have chosen, selected amongst them leaders, أئمة, examples and role models, not only for their communities, but for the whole humanity, till the end of time. When they believed in our verses, in our words, and when they held tight on it with patience and steadfastness, and they had firm belief in the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as such the scholars said, بِالصَّبْرِ وَالْيَقِينِ يَكُونُ التَّمْكِينُ. With firm belief and steadfastness, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows you to be founded, deeply rooted on earth, and indeed lead and establish the Islamic example that the Prophet ﷺ has done. And this is what scholars said: do not go astray from the path of guidance, regardless how few the walkers on it. When you're walking the path of guidance, even you have very few companions along, be steadfast. Do not go astray. And do not be fooled by the route of misguidance, regardless how many people are going astray. Because it is the nature of a human being to go with the crowd, to go with the flow, and with the bigger numbers. And here it is to the contrary. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, do not do that. And He's giving you the example of Ibrahim alayhi salam, giving you the believers who were along with him. And example after example, even with our Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, who has migrated from Mecca to Medina after 13 years of struggle, 13 years of tireless effort, to bring people to the guidance, to the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And how many people he was able to gather? Less than 100 people. This whole migration, the hijrah of the Prophet ﷺ, after 13 years of tireless effort, day and night, and struggle, less than 100 people. In 80s actually. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving you all these examples that it may not sound as easy as it looks in the beginning, but yet after being patient, showing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the firm belief and the steadfastness, then He makes you prevail. And He brings your heart to Him and make all those people with you, inshallah, victorious and prevalent on the guidance of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And this is exactly what the companions of the Prophet ﷺ represented after him. One of the scholars of the early generation was asked, we always talk about Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah, the people of Sunnah and Jama'ah. So he asked them, who are the people of Jama'ah? Who represent them? So he said, Al-Jama'ah are Abu Bakr and Umar. And that's it. Meaning those people are sufficient to the whole Muslim nation all over history, till the end of the time. So whatever they say carries weight more than the rest of the nation. He said, Al-Jama'atu Abu Bakr and Umar. With their faith, with their firm belief, with their adherence to the guidance of the Prophet ﷺ, and the great love they had for Allah and His Prophet, they were equivalent to the entire nation of the Muslims. And indeed, this is what the Prophet ﷺ said about Abu Bakr, even himself as an individual. If you put the iman of Abu Bakr in one hand, and the iman of the entire people on the other, then the iman of Abu Bakr outweighs the rest of it. And this is our example that should be our role model, the one that we should follow the footsteps, inshallah, in adherence to the Prophet ﷺ, love to Allah, and striving for the sake of His satisfaction, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And another example, when Amr ibn al-As was attempting to conquer Egypt, after 5 years of struggle, they were almost going to give up. But then he sent a letter to Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu for more support. He wanted like an extra army to come and help. So what does Umar radiallahu anhu do? He sends him 4 people. Said, I'm sending you 4 people. Such and such. But do know that each of these 4 is equivalent to 1,000 people of your army. So hold tight on them and preserve them. He's giving him the pearls, the jewels, the best, the elite of the companions of the Prophet. And the question is, if each person of those was equivalent to at least 1,000 people, how much do we count? What's our faith is equivalent in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Is it the opposite? That 1,000 of us may be one of them? Or 1,000,000? Allahu Akbar. Point is that you have to be that person that when the Prophet ﷺ looks at in the day of judgment, be satisfied and tells you, good job, this is exactly what I would have done, and this is the kind of person I would want to see. This is the message that we have to be as that person in the middle of the night making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, make me among those who are few, amongst the few of these people. This is what we want to be. This is what we should aspire for, and this is what our ambition should be focused on. It is not about the material gain. It is not about competing who has a nicer car, who has a bigger house, and who has a bigger bank account, and who's doing better trading in stocks and this and that. It's about who is going to be best in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and who is going to copy the example of the companions who truly manifested the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if they were able to do it, if Allah has honored them, yes indeed He can honor us, and we ask Him subhanahu wa ta'ala to be among those. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فيا فوز المستغفرين.